What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to talk about the whole conspiracy thing. Now, for those of you that are unaware at the moment, Digimon as it stands, it turns out it's quite hard to get hold of. Now, the reason that Digimon is quite hard to get hold of is because we've had a super pre-sale which happened in November. The super pre-sale is essentially over, and the main release of Booster 1.0 is going to be happening in January. But we are already hearing rumours that the theme decks are going to be delayed, that stock is going to be low, and that it is going to be very difficult to get your hands on these, at least initially. And I have heard all kinds of conspiracy theories. Now, generally speaking, conspiracy theories usually fall in one of two camps. Camp number one, Digimon is deliberately strangling supply to try and build hype for the game. And theory number two, Digimon have underestimated how popular the game is and are unable to supply enough. Now, as someone who... there are basically two facets to how I make my living. Number one is as a teacher, which for about the last decade and a half has been law and business. And the other half has been talking about trading card games. So when it comes to trading card games and the business thereof, I like to think that I am better positioned than the vast majority of people to know what I'm talking about and be able to explain this. The first thing I need to point out, and this is really important, this game was supposed to launch in November. The super pre-sale in November was not what Bandai intended. Now, quick disclaimer at the start here, I don't work for Bandai. I don't have any sources inside of Bandai. There is a chance that I'm wrong about this, as with all of this. You can never know for absolute certain unless you work in the company itself and are part of the decision-making process, but I'll explain why I am 100% sure that the super pre-sale was never intended as a super pre-sale. I do have anonymous sources outside of the company that have told me this is the case, and you can feel free to believe me or not on that, that's fine. But the fact of the matter is, this game was supposed to be launched in November, and the reason is really simple. November is when you launch stuff like trading card games. January, when the actual full release is happening, is the worst time to release a trading card game. And if you don't believe me, let's look at some recent trading card games that launched. Anyone want to guess some release dates? So let's go for Keyforge. Call of the Archons was the first set. Keyforge, fairly popular game. When did it release? Oh, look. November the 15th, 2018. The Transformers trading card game. Now, that did actually release slightly earlier on September the 28th, 2018, which is very end of September, very start of October, a month earlier than you would usually expect, but it's still there or thereabouts. It's still what you would expect. If we look at the Final Fantasy TCG and their Opus 1 release date, it released on the 28th of October, 2016. And I'm sure you can find some exceptions to this, and that's fine. Not every single game launches at the same time, but it is not a coincidence that kind of November or just before is when it's released. When you look at things like the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, these were released in November, and this isn't some kind of weird, unexplained coincidence. This is when people are spending money. If you're going to release a new trading card game, you release it in November. If you're releasing a big video game console, you release it in November, because that is when people are spending money. The two biggest months for shopping are November and December, but you don't want to release stuff in December. Yes, there are always exceptions. Because if you release stuff in December, you're taking out one of the big shopping months. You might see some games try and get in slightly before that, but generally speaking, you release in October/November. Because that's when you're going to get the Christmas shoppers, that's when people are spending all their money. That is why, if you track trading card games, the majority of them are released in that window. Then you look that we had the super pre-sale in November, and at this stage it should be pretty obvious that Bandai were looking to do a November release. Now, why don't you release in January? Why is releasing in January a terrible idea? because nobody's got any money. Yes, I know some people get Christmas money, blah, blah, blah. There is a reason why shops go super hard on their sales in January. Because January is when people don't have money, so you have to do the January sales to entice people in. If January was a great month for shopping, you wouldn't see January sales. It would make no sense. If you look at advertising spending by companies, there are 3 months where advertising spending is horrendous. And again, I speak as someone who a large part of their living is YouTube and ad revenue. January, February, and March. What is relevant about those 3 months? They are the 3 months between Christmas and the new financial year. New financial year kicks off in April, which is when all the budgets get redone, etc. As of April, companies redo their budgets. They've got money, they start spending again. The period between Christmas and the new financial year, advertising spending goes way down, advertising revenue goes way down. And the reason is that companies aren't going to bother advertising loads because they know people don't have lots of money, which is why you release in November. Releasing a TCG in January is a very bad idea because you are releasing in the worst possible time when companies have generally spent their advertising budget, customers have generally spent their money, and people are tightening their belts after Christmas. However, what's the other option? You've been delayed. You couldn't release in November. So what do? You release in January. No, it's not ideal, but essentially you take the hit and you cross your fingers and you hope that it has been good enough. You hope that the hype is enough. You don't do a super pre-sale in November to try and raise hype for a January release. That makes no sense. Teasing people when they've got money to spend and then releasing it when they don't, that is not the way businesses work. It makes little sense. The only reason you would do that, it's not some conspiracy to build hype. The reason you do that is because you have to. And I have seen all kinds of theories about why Digimon didn't release more and why the allocation for the super pre-sale got cut, why the allocation for January might be getting cut, etc. And I know people don't want to believe this, and I have seen multiple posts that have literally said, don't blame this. No, it's the pandemic. You cannot want to blame the pandemic as much as you like. You can be bored about hearing about the pandemic, and I know I am. But the fact of the matter is, that's the reason. And if you want to know why it's the reason, go and look at the post that Digimon made. Due to limitations on our production capacity, due to coronavirus, we have had to make the difficult decision to allocate Digimon Super Sneak Peek pre-sale quantities to registered stores. They are literally telling you themselves, look, we would like to get more money, we would like to sell more product, our production is being hit. Go and look at like any news outlet. Go and read up on production, distribution, etc. The fact of the matter is, production, distribution, logistics, it has all been hit massively by the pandemic. And that means that when you're trying to produce, trading cards, it becomes more difficult. At the end of the day, Bandai is a profit-making business. They want to sell you their products. They want to make as much money as they can by selling as many products as they can. It is not in their best interest to deliberately constrain supply, especially not for Set 1. Set 1 is not the set to constrain supply and build hype, because all you do in that situation is turn away people. Set 1 is a set where you want to flood the market with as much product as you can, get as many people hooked as you can, so that they buy future sets. This is the starter set, the base set. This is a set from which they work. And if there are shortages in January, if your shop isn't getting as much as they want, you can go for all the conspiracy theories you like, ladies and gentlemen, although I like to think that people watching this video are a bit smarter than that. But the reality is extremely simple. Bandai supply has been hit because factories are cutting capacity because we got a global pandemic. Distribution is more difficult because distribution companies are cutting capacity because we're in a global pandemic. By the time the pandemic hit, this game was too far along, and it essentially had to be launched. The work had been done. It would have made so much more sense to hold this game until November 2021. But then it's way too far behind the Japanese version of the game, which is already launched. The work has been done, etc. You can't leave it, so you do the best. Launching as a pre-sale in November, cutting quantity at the last minute, releasing properly in January, potentially cutting quantity for that. These are all decisions Bandai don't want to make. And this happens in every card game I follow. For some reason, every single card game I follow, without exception, whether it's made by Fantasy Flight Games, Bandai, Wizards of the Coast, whoever makes it, there are a group of people who all they want to do is come out and say, X company doesn't know how to run a trading card game. Wizards don't know how, Fantasy Flight Games don't know how, Bandai doesn't know how. Apparently there is not a company in the world that knows how to run a trading card game. And I've seen so many angry people coming around and just really being negative and talking about how Bandai are handling this terribly and Bandai don't know what they're doing. The fact of the matter is, Bandai had a plan. Bandai's plan failed. They are doing the best they can with what they've got. But let's finish on some good news, shall we? Because the fact of the matter is, this game is doing well. The fact of the matter is, people are struggling to find product because of how popular the game is. And in a weird kind of way, that's a good thing. Because it means that people are into this game, and it is good for the long-term health of the game. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's not going to last, as in this constrained supply. Bandai will be furiously collecting information from retailers, trying to figure out exactly how much they can sell, and then that is what they're going to produce. Now, you are going to see some sets that sell out in the future. Absolutely you are. That is a given. The thing you always need to remember, though, is that for every 5 people moaning they couldn't get the set, there are thousands and thousands of people that did. Either, when you produce, one of two things are going to happen. Either you're going to overproduce and you're going to lose money, or you're going to underproduce and you're going to lose out on a few potential sales. So you have to try and walk that line, and it's impossible to do well. It's impossible to do it perfectly. And what happens is a lot of companies tend to err on the side of caution. They'd rather lose out on some potential sales and make product that doesn't sell and take the hit on money they've already spent. Which is why you sometimes see products which are a bit harder to find. But if you're there at the beginning, if you're there day one, I have not struggled to buy any product for any TCG on day one because the supply's out there. The only exception has been in the last kind of year when we've been in a global pandemic. So the too long didn't watch version is, no, Bandai did not do a super pre-sale in November to artificially build hype. That makes no sense. It doesn't work. Now, if they'd done a super pre-sale in the summer to stoke the hype for November, that would have made sense, but November for January does not make sense. November was supposed to be the full release. January was an emergency stopgap. Yes, there are issues with supply, but no, it's not because of any conspiracy. It's because we're in a global pandemic and factories are working at far from full capacity. No, do not expect this to carry on in the future. Yes, do expect some sets to sell out when they're popular, but you're talking about, well, I didn't pre-order it and I didn't buy it in the first couple of days and now I can't find it anywhere. Not half of the player base couldn't get this set day one. If nothing else, this shows the hype and the love for the game, and that is a good thing. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to weigh in on the subject. Please be nice and please try and stay away from conspiracy theories and angrily yelling that Digimon don't know what they're doing, or Bandai, because actually, from everything I've seen, they really do know what they're doing. They are just being forced into some awkward situations. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk Digimon and a bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wasi Plays.